Brad, why can't we just be together openly? I muttered under my breath as I heard those words from my husband's office. My heart pounded in my chest as I froze outside his door, eavesdropping on the heated conversation between him and Tara, our young business partner. Trust me, Tara, we need to keep this quiet a little longer, Brad's voice responded, laced with a tenderness I hadn't heard from him in years. A sick feeling washed over me as the realization dawned. My husband of 20 years was having an affair with our employee, right under my nose. Memories flashed through my mind, taking me back to the early days when Brad and I had started our tech company from scratch. We were young, ambitious, and blissfully in love, working tirelessly alongside our small team to make our dream a reality. Tara had joined us fresh out of college, her youthful energy and innovative ideas quickly making her an invaluable asset. Funny how things can change so drastically without you even realizing it. As the business grew, so did Tara's influence over Brad. I noticed her overly friendly demeanor, the way she would linger a little too long during their conversations, and how Brad seemed increasingly enamored with her ideas. At first, I brushed it off as professional camaraderie, but the nagging feeling in my gut only intensified with each passing day. Then came the late nights at the office, the unexplained absences, and the sudden influx of suspicious charges on Brad's credit card statements. I tried to confront him, but he always had an excuse ready, dismissing my concerns with a wave of his hand. One fateful evening, I decided to follow my instincts. I tailed Brad and Tara to a luxurious hotel downtown, my heart shattering as I witnessed them entering hand in hand, laughing and completely oblivious to my presence. Funny seeing you two here. Planning a business meeting? I called out, my voice dripping with sarcasm as I stepped into the lobby. Brad's face drained of color, his excuses tumbling out in a jumbled mess. But Tara, that conniving little vixen, simply smirked and said, "Oh, Jenna, don't be so naive. Brad and I are in love, and there's nothing you can do about it." In that moment, something inside me snapped. The years of loyalty, sacrifice, and emotional investment I had poured into our marriage and business came crashing down around me. I would not be the one left broken and humiliated. Not this time. The next morning, I marched into the best divorce attorney's office, determined to fight for every penny of the empire Brad and I had built together. If he thought he could simply discard me for his younger mistress, he had another thing coming. As the dust settled from my initial confrontation with Brad and Tara, I found myself retreating into memories of happier times, back when our dream was just taking shape. Those early days were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, fueled by passion and an unwavering belief in our vision. Brad and I had met fresh out of college, both brilliant minds with a knack for coding and an insatiable drive to create something revolutionary. We scraped together every penny we had and rented a dingy little office space, assembling a ragtag team of fellow tech enthusiasts who shared our ambitious goals. Mark, our trusty developer, was the first to join us, bringing his unparalleled coding skills and a wicked sense of humor that kept our spirits high during the toughest moments. Then came Linda, a fierce legal eagle whose sharp wit and strategic thinking became invaluable assets as we navigated the treacherous waters of startup life. Those early years were a constant uphill battle, with more setbacks than successes. But through it all, Brad and I remained a united front, our love for each other and our dream fueling our persistence. We worked tirelessly, often pulling all-nighters to meet deadlines and secure funding. "You two are crazy. You know that?" Linda would tease, shaking her head as she found us hunched over our laptops at 3 a.m., sustaining ourselves on stale donuts and lukewarm coffee. "Crazy's the only way to make it in this business," Brad would retort with a mischievous grin, his eyes sparkling with determination. And make it we did. Against all odds, our little startup began to gain traction, attracting the attention of major investors and industry heavyweights. With each success, our team grew stronger, our bond forged through countless battles and shared triumphs. That's when Tara joined us, fresh-faced and brimming with ambition. At first, I welcomed her enthusiasm, never suspecting the serpent that lurked beneath her innocent facade. Little did I know that her arrival would mark the beginning of the end for the life I had so carefully crafted. "Jenna, darling, you really should let me handle the investor meetings from now on." She would purr, her words dripping with false concern. "You've been working so hard lately, you deserve a break." Foolishly, I brushed off her comments, blinded by the success we were enjoying and the unwavering trust I had in Brad. But with each passing day, Tara's influence over him grew stronger, her venomous words slowly poisoning his mind against me. As I delved deeper into the betrayal, the memories of our early struggles took on a bittersweet tinge. The very foundations upon which we had built our empire were now crumbling beneath the weight of lies and deceit. But even as the sting of Brad's infidelity threatened to consume me, a newfound determination took root. If they thought they could simply discard me like yesterday's garbage, they had severely underestimated the fury of a woman scorned. I would fight for what was rightfully mine, and they would rue the day they ever crossed me. As the months dragged on, Tara's infiltration into our once tight-knit circle became increasingly pronounced. Her sickly sweet demeanor would quickly sour the moment Brad left the room, replaced by a calculating coldness that sent shivers down my spine. "You're looking a bit worn out today, Jenna," she would simper, her ruby-red lips curled into a patronizing smile. "Maybe you should take the afternoon off. Let the rest of us handle things." I would bite my tongue, forcing a tight-lipped smile as I watched her slink over to Brad's side, draping herself over him like a cheap suit. The way he would beam at her suggestive comments, oblivious to the venom she spewed the moment his back was turned, made my stomach churn. Worst of all were the investor meetings, where Tara would shamelessly flaunt her youth and charm, soaking up the attention like a preening peacock. I could see the hungry looks in the eyes of our potential business partners, their gazes lingering just a little too long on her exposed curves. "Fellas, eyes up here," she would purr, reveling in the spectacle she created. "Unless you'd like Jenna and me to give you a private demonstration later?" The grating laughter that followed those crude remarks was like nails on a chalkboard, but Brad seemed utterly entranced, hanging on her every word. "Tara's just being Tara," he would chuckle, brushing off my concerns with a wave of his hand. "You know how she loves to play up the sex kitten act for these old geezers." But I knew better. With each passing day, Tara's grip on Brad tightened, her insidious whispers slowly turning him against me and everyone else who had stood by us from the beginning. "You know, Mark's coat has been looking pretty sloppy lately," she would murmur, her voice dripping with false concern. "Maybe it's time we brought in some fresh talent, get this project back on track." Before I knew it, longtime colleagues who had bled alongside us were being pushed out, replaced by Tara's hand-picked cronies. Her twisted tentacles were slowly tightening around our company, squeezing the life out of everything we had built. Yet, no matter how many warnings I issued, Brad seemed blissfully oblivious to her machinations, too besotted by her youthful charms to see the serpent lurking beneath. The final straw came when I overheard a heated argument between them, their voices carrying from the confines of Brad's office. "We can't keep funneling money into that offshore account, Tara," Brad hissed, his usual bravado replaced by a quivering uncertainty. "Jenna's getting suspicious, and the auditors are breathing down my neck." "Don't be such a coward, Bradley," Tara snapped, her honeyed tones replaced by a biting venom. "We're so close to having everything we've ever wanted. A little thing like your wife isn't going to stop us now." As the weight of her words crashed over me, a cold clarity washed away the final vestiges of denial. This went far beyond a mere affair. Tara's claws were dug deep into the financial lifeblood of our company, and she was bleeding us dry. In that moment, I knew there was only one path forward: to fight with every ounce of my being, to excise this malignant tumor before it destroyed everything we had worked so hard to build. The gloves were finally off, and I would show no mercy. After weeks of mounting suspicion and piecing together the twisted web of lies, I decided it was time to catch Brad and Tara red-handed. I hired a private investigator to track their movements, and sure enough, the sleazy truth was unveiled. They had been carrying on their sordid affair at a luxurious hotel downtown, using company funds to finance their trysts. The thought of them squandering the money we had poured our blood, sweat, and tears into made my blood boil. One evening, as the investigators' report placed them at the hotel, I took matters into my own hands. Gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled fury, I tailed them from a distance, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and grim determination. As I pulled up to the opulent entrance, I spotted their car parked brazenly in the valet area. Taking a deep breath, I strode through the revolving doors, my heels clicking against the marble floors like a death knell. There they were, ensconced in a plush sofa in the lobby bar, Brad's arm draped possessively around Tara's waist as she giggled and batted her lashes at him. The sight of their twisted intimacy made my stomach churn. "Funny seeing you two here," I announced, my voice ringing out like a gunshot in the hushed ambience. "Planning a business meeting, I assume?" Brad's head whipped around, his face draining of color as he registered my presence. "Jenna, what are you doing here?" Tara, however, simply rolled her eyes and took a languid sip of her cocktail. "Oh, please. Spare us the theatrics, Jenna. We both know you've been aware of our little arrangement for quite some time now." Her brazen admission hit me like a sucker punch to the gut. All the months of suspicion and gut-wrenching doubt came crashing down in that moment, leaving me reeling. You vile little snake," I spat, my carefully cultivated composure crumbling. "How could you, Brad? After everything we've been through together?" Brad's mouth opened and closed like a gasping fish, his excuses dying on his lips as Tara calmly stroked his arm in a sickeningly possessive gesture. "Don't be so dramatic, Jenna," she purred, her voice dripping with contempt. "Bradley and I are simply pursuing our happiness together, something you've clearly failed to provide him with." Her words lanced through me like white-hot daggers, laying bare the insecurities and inadequacies I had grappled with for months. But even as the emotional floodgates threatened to burst open, something hardened within me, a steely resolve forged in the fires of my rage. "You want dramatic?" I snarled, leaning in until I was nose to nose with the smirking viper. "I'll show you dramatic, you backstabbing little tramp." Straightening up, I turned to Brad, who visibly shrank under my withering glare. "Don't even think about coming home tonight. In fact, don't bother coming home at all. I'm filing for divorce first thing in the morning, and I'm taking you for every last penny you're worth." Spinning on my heel, I stormed out of the lobby, my head held high despite the maelstrom of emotions raging within. The battle lines had been drawn, and there would be no quarter given. They wanted war? They had just declared it on the wrong woman. True to my word, the next morning I marched into the office of the most cutthroat divorce attorney in town and laid everything on the table. The anger and humiliation still burned hot within me as I recounted the sordid tale of Brad's betrayal and Tara's underhanded machinations. "I want everything," I growled, slamming my fist on the desk for emphasis. "The house, the cars, a majority stake in the company, and I want that little snake Tara out on her ass." The shark-like grin that spread across the lawyer's face told me I had come to the right place. "Consider it done, Mrs. Thompson. We're going to bleed your soon-to-be ex-husband dry." With those words, the legal firestorm was unleashed. I hit Brad with divorce papers faster than he could say irreconcilable differences, leaving him and his little mistress reeling. Of course, the two degenerates didn't go down without a fight. Brad sauntered into the office the next day, Tara clinging to his arm like a remora to a shark, both wearing matching sneers of arrogant disdain. "You really think you can take this company away from me, Jenna?" Brad scoffed, puffing out his chest. "I built this empire from the ground up. You were just along for the ride." "That's right," Tara chimed in, her shrill voice like nails on a chalkboard. "And now that Brad and I are together, we're going to take this business to even greater heights. You won't get a penny more than the courts decide." I wanted nothing more than to slap that smug look off her face, but I held my tongue. They could posture and bluster all they wanted. I knew I had them by the proverbial short and curlies. Thanks to the detailed records I had meticulously kept over the years, documenting Brad's shady dealings and Tara's financial chicanery, I had a legal sledgehammer poised to crush their delusions of grandeur. "You want to play hardball?" I asked, leaning back in my chair with a wolfish grin. "Fine by me. I've got enough evidence of your little slush fund scam to bury you both in civil and criminal charges." The blood drained from Brad's face as his bravado rapidly deflated. Tara, on the other hand, simply glared at me with undisguised hatred, her scarlet talons digging into Brad's arm. From that point on, it was open warfare. Our once thriving startup descended into a bitter battle zone, with each side lobbing legal salvos and vicious accusations. Loyal soldiers quickly rallied to my side, disgusted by Brad and Tara's flagrant betrayal. Mark, bless his brilliant but socially inept heart, became my unofficial tech wizard, quietly gathering evidence of Brad's financial misdeeds. Linda, with her razor-sharp legal mind, tore apart their flimsy fence piece by piece in deposition after deposition. Meanwhile, our board of investors grew increasingly uneasy with the turmoil, watching in horror as the shining jewel of our company became tarnished by the endless cycle of scandals. Still, through it all, Brad and Tara maintained their aura of delusional confidence, secure in their belief that his stranglehold on the business would carry the day. Little did they know, their downfall was merely a matter of time, and I would be the one delivering the killing blow. The day of reckoning finally arrived, and the air in the courthouse crackled with tension as Brad, Tara, and I squared off before the stern-faced judge. Despite their bravado, I could see the first flickers of doubt in their eyes as the weight of the evidence against them became impossible to ignore. "You won't get a penny more than the courts decide, Jenna," Brad hissed under his breath, his lips curled in a sneer. "I control this company. It's mine." Before I could respond, the bailiff called the courtroom to order, and the proceedings began in earnest. I watched with grim satisfaction as my legal team methodically dismantled Brad and Tara's defense, presenting a mountain of damning evidence that left them squirming in their seats. Financial records detailing their embezzlement schemes, caught on tape conspiring to funnel company funds into offshore accounts, even secretly recorded audio of Tara coercing Brad to cut me out of the business entirely. It was all laid bare for the world to see. With each bombshell revelation, Tara's smug veneer cracked a little more, her perfectly coiffed mask slipping to reveal the vicious snake lurking beneath. Brad, for his part, simply sat in stunned silence, the reality of his impending downfall slowly sinking in. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the judge banged her gavel, calling for order in the courtroom. "In light of the overwhelming evidence presented," she began, her steely gaze sweeping over the trio of co-conspirators, "I am ruling in favor of Mrs. Thompson on all counts." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery, but I simply sat back and allowed a small, victorious smile to spread across my face. The old bat wasn't done yet. "Mr. Thompson and Ms. Roberts, your actions have not only violated the sanctity of your marriage vows, but have also shown a blatant disregard for corporate ethics and the law itself," the judge continued, her voice laced with disgust. "As such, I am awarding Mrs. Thompson a controlling stake in the company, effective immediately, as well as the entirety of the marital assets." Tara let out a strangled shriek of outrage, her perfectly manicured claws digging into the wooden bench as she fought to maintain her composure. Brad, on the other hand, simply slumped forward, his head cradled in his hands as the weight of his defeat crushed him. But the judge wasn't finished. Leaning forward, she fixed them with a piercing glare that could have melted steel. "Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for a full investigation into potential criminal charges related to fraud, embezzlement, and corporate malfeasance. You two have made a mockery of the legal system and the values this company was built upon, and you will face the full consequences of your actions." As the bailiffs led the disgraced pair away in handcuffs, Tara still screeching obscenities through her smeared makeup, I couldn't help but savor the sweetness of victory. They had underestimated me at every turn, secure in their belief that they could simply trample all over me and walk away unscathed. Well, they were about to learn just how wrong they were, and I would delight in grinding their precious empire into the dust beneath my designer heels. With the legal battle decisively won, and Brad and Tara's misdeeds laid bare, I wasted no time in asserting my new control over the company. My first order of business? Clearing out the rot that had infested the ranks thanks to their toxic influence. One by one, I handpicked Tara's gaggle of sycophants and tossed them out on their oversculpted behinds, reveling in the looks of abject horror on their stunned faces as security escorted them from the premises. But Miss Roberts assured us we would be taken care of." One particularly vapid little thing sputtered, her fake lashes fluttering in panic. I simply shrugged, utterly unmoved. Well, Miss Roberts isn't calling the shots anymore. I'd suggest finding a new sugar mama to leech off of. With the dead weight jettisoned, I set about rebuilding our once proud company from the ground up, surrounding myself with trusted allies like Mark and Linda. They had stuck by me through the darkest days of the legal firestorm, and their loyalty would be rewarded tenfold. Of course, Brad and his slithering paramour didn't go quietly into the night. Even from behind bars, they launched a vicious media smear campaign, painting me as a heartless, vindictive shrew determined to destroy everything they had built. Jenna Thompson is a bitter, jealous woman lashing out at her ex-husband out of sheer spite, Tara whined to anyone who would listen, her voice trembling with faux indignation. She's taking her revenge too far and jeopardizing the livelihoods of hundreds of innocent employees. I simply smiled and shook my head at their pathetic attempts to sway public opinion. The evidence of their misdeeds was too overwhelming, the stench of their corruption too overpowering to be washed away with a few crocodile tears. As the weeks ticked by, their once formidable empire began to crumble around them, a self-inflicted wound caused by years of shady dealings and gross mismanagement. Business partners jumped ship in droves, repulsed by the stain of scandal. Investors clamored for their money back, unwilling to be dragged down with the sinking ship. All the while, I watched from the sidelines with a mixture of vindication and pity. These were the same two arrogant fools who had smugly assured me that they controlled everything, that I was simply a footnote in their grand narrative. Yet with each passing day, their grandiose delusions withered further, until they were left with nothing but the ashes of their shattered legacy. And I, the woman they had so callously discarded, was there to sweep up the remains and rebuild an empire worthy of the sacrifices that had been made. The final insult came when their former colleagues, desperate to salvage what was left of the business, came groveling to me with an offer to buy out the remaining assets at a fraction of their worth. I could have dragged out the negotiations, bled them dry as payback for the anguish they had put me through. Instead, I simply smiled, slid the contract across the table, and said, "Just get it over with, boys. I have a new empire to build." As they scurried away with their tails between their legs, I leaned back in my chair and allowed the vindication to wash over me. The ultimate revenge? Reducing Brad and Tara's grandiose dreams to a mere footnote in the legacy I was crafting for myself. In the months that followed, the tables well and truly turned on Brad and Tara. As I thrived in my new role at the helm of my own blossoming entrepreneurial ventures, they found themselves drowning in a cesspool of their own making. The money, the status, the glamorous lifestyle they had so desperately coveted, it all slipped through their greedy fingers like fistfuls of sand. With each passing day, news of their downward spiral made the headlines, a sordid tale of hubris and karma come full circle. Former tech mogul Bradley Thompson faces additional fraud charges, the headlines would scream, detailing the latest revelations of financial malfeasance. Tara, for her part, fared no better. Her youthful looks, once her greatest asset in ensnaring hapless men like my former husband, withered under the harsh glare of public scrutiny. No amount of overpriced cosmetic procedures could hide the haggard, haunted look in her eyes as the walls closed in around her. Disgraced socialite Tara Roberts spotted in seedy motel, the tabloids would crow, plastering unflattering photos of the fallen temptress across their sleazy pages. I'll admit, there was a perverse sense of satisfaction in watching their downward spiral play out in such spectacular fashion. These were the same two vipers who had once looked down their noses at me, secure in their belief that they held all the cards. Now the roles were reversed, and I was the one calling the shots. An inescapable truth that seemed to torment them more than any prison sentence or financial ruin ever could. "You haven't seen the last of me, Jenna," Tara snarled during one of her increasingly unhinged television interviews. "Mark my words, I'll be back on top before you know it, and you'll be the one groveling at my feet." I simply chuckled at her empty bravado, secure in the knowledge that her words carried all the weight of a deflating balloon. She was a spent force, a cautionary tale of what happens when ambition and greed consume one's moral compass. As for Brad, well, his fate was perhaps the most tragic of all. Once a proud, ambitious man with the world at his feet, he had been reduced to a hollow shell of his former self, his spirit broken by the weight of his own misdeeds. During his highly publicized trial, I watched from the gallery as he shuffled into the courtroom, his shoulders slumped, his eyes downcast. Gone was the cocksure swagger, the easy charm that had once made him so magnetic. In its place was a haunted, defeated man, the consequences of his actions finally coming into stark relief. In the end, both he and Tara were handed lengthy prison sentences, along with crushing financial penalties that would ensure they could never again regain a foothold in the business world. As the judge read out their fate, I caught Brad's gaze, his hollow eyes silently pleading for, what? Understanding? Forgiveness? I simply held his stare, my expression impassive, until he finally dropped his head in resignation. There would be no absolution, no second chances. He had made his bed, and now he would lie in it, forever branded as the man who threw away everything for a pretty face and a few fleeting moments of pleasure. As I stepped out into the brilliant sunshine, leaving the sordid spectacle behind, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me. The long, arduous road I had traveled, fraught with heartbreak and betrayal, had finally reached its end. A new chapter was beginning, one forged from the ashes of the life I had once known. And as I looked to the future, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the strength and resilience that had carried me through my darkest hours. I've found the strength to reclaim my life and destiny, I murmured, more to myself than anyone else, and no one will ever take that away from me again. You think you can trust family to have your back, but what happens when they're the ones holding the knife? Those words rang hollow in my mind as I stared numbly at the incriminating photos strewn across my desk. Pictures of my younger sister Alina and my boyfriend Jamie, intimate moments captured that shattered my world into pieces. How could you do this to me? I asked hoarsely, tears streaming down my cheeks as Jamie shifted uncomfortably in front of me. Alina simply smirked. Did you really think he could ever be fully satisfied with someone as dull and boring as you, sis? Jamie deserves excitement in his life, something you've never been able to provide. The venom in her words stung, made worse by Jamie's refusal to meet my eyes. My creative passion as a graphic designer used to energize him, or so I thought. But Alina's magnetic charm had clearly seduced him. I was 28 years old, established in my career, and thinking I had the perfect life in our big city. Meanwhile, Alina at 24 had always seethed with jealousy at my accomplishments, masking it behind a dazzling smile. This has to stop right now, I stated firmly, trying to regain some semblance of control. Jamie, we're through. And you, Alina, get out of my apartment. I never want to see your face again. Jamie opened his mouth but seemed to think better of it. Without a word, he turned and left, the slamming door an exclamation point on our now shattered relationship. Alina just laughed derisively. Oh, Brenna, always trying to be the principled one. Without me, you'd be completely alone in this world. Deep down, you know you need me more than I need you. I looked at her with a mix of heartbreak and disgust. This was my own flesh and blood, someone who was supposed to have my back. But her callous betrayal cut deeper than any wound. Grabbing my purse, I pushed past her towards the exit. I'm going to stay at a hotel tonight. Don't be there when I get back tomorrow to collect my things. Running away again? She taunted. Just like when we were kids. I tuned out her voice, her toxic words no longer able to draw a reaction. My life as I knew it lay in ruins, but I would rebuild from the ashes. Starting now, Alina was dead to me. The next day, I returned to an empty apartment, just as I had demanded. As I packed my belongings, Jamie's discarded shirts and Alina's makeup stained the space that was once my sanctuary. I knew in that moment nothing would be the same. But at least one truth had been unveiled. The person I should have been able to trust above all others was the blade that cut deepest. With my life in boxes, I left behind the ruins of my past. Where I was headed, I didn't know. But any path away from Alina's deceit and the memory of Jamie's ultimate betrayal was the right direction. Blood might be thicker than water, but for me, the blood between sisters had been irreparably poisoned. It was time to start over and rebuild myself from this broken state. It had been 3 months since I left behind the wreckage of my life in that city. The stabbing pain had subsided into a dull ache, but I couldn't shake the bitter taste of betrayal from my mouth. I had settled into a cozy studio apartment and secured a freelance graphic design gig to keep me afloat. At least work provided a temporary escape from dwelling on Alina's treachery and Jamie's unfaithfulness. Then one evening my phone rang with an eerily familiar number. Against my better judgment, I answered tentatively. "Hello? Brenna?" My traitorous sister's sickly sweet voice oozed through the line. "It's me, Alina. I've been trying to reach you." My grip tightened on the phone. "What do you want? I have nothing left to say to you." "Please, you have to hear me out," she pleaded, her tone dripping with feigned remorse. "Jamie was just a horrible mistake. I've realized how much I need my big sister in my life." I scoffed at her audacity. "You stabbed me in the back and stole my boyfriend, all because you were jealous of my life. Why should I believe a word you say?" There was a pause, and then a sniffle, like she was choking back tears. "You're right, I was spiteful and cruel. I was so envious of what you had achieved that I tried to take it for myself. I've hit rock bottom, Brenna. I have nowhere else to turn." The remorseful act was almost convincing, but then I remembered the smug satisfaction on her face as she revealed the sordid affair. "Save your crocodile tears," I snapped. "You chose to betray me, and now you have to live with the consequences. Don't contact me again." I went to hang up, but her panicked voice burst through. "Wait, I'm pregnant, and the baby is Jamie's." Those words landed like a sucker punch to the gut. I drew in a shaky breath, my mind spinning. "You're lying," I managed weakly. "This is just another one of your manipulative games." "I swear on Mom and Dad's graves," she said, deadly serious now. "I need your support, Brenna. You're all I have left in this world. Please." Part of me inwardly recoiled at the thought of offering any help to the person who decimated my life. But another part, the hapless sister deep within, wanted to believe there was still a shred of redeemable humanity in Alina. "If what you're saying is true," I said carefully, "then you're going to need somewhere to stay and some help getting on your feet for the baby's sake. Not for you. Never for you again." "Thank you," she gushed, the relief palpable in her voice. "I'll make the arrangements right away to come stay with you. You won't regret this, I promise." I doubted those words, but I'd take solace in being able to keep my unforgivable sister at a distance while ensuring her child didn't suffer for her sins. As I hung up, an uneasy knot twisted in my gut. Deep down, I feared that allowing Alina back into my world, even peripherally, was a recipe for future disaster. But I owed it to that innocent baby to try to rein in its conniving mother. If she burned me again, there would be no more second chances. The bridge would be burned for good this time. Only then would I be free from the heavy burden of the sister I once loved, but now loathed. Against my better judgment, I agreed to let Alina stay with me until she got back on her feet. 3 days later, there was a knocking at my door. I steeled myself and pulled it open to see Alina standing there, her bump clearly visible beneath a tight maternity dress. She brushed past me without a word, suitcases in tow. "I've converted the den into a little nursery area for you," I said stiffly. "The couch pulls out to a bed." Alina shrugged as she dropped her bags. "I guess this place will have to do for now." Her dismissive tone immediately put me on edge. Over the next few weeks, the tension was suffocating. Alina insisted on having friends over frequently to my tiny apartment, drinking wine and gossiping loudly while I tried to get work done. I felt like an intruder in my own home. One evening, I finally snapped as a raucous group spilled out of the den, clouds of smoke entering my bedroom. "Get these people out of my apartment now!" I barked at Alina, who was cradling her belly as she took a long drag from a cigarette. She feigned an innocent look. "We're just having a little fun, Brenna. You need to learn to lighten up." That smug, infuriating look on her face, it was too much. I had dealt with her endless insults and violations of my boundaries, all for the sake of that unborn child. But enough was enough. "Get out," I said, struggling to contain the rage boiling inside me. "I should have never let you back into my life." Alina sneered, stabbing her cigarette into an ashtray. "What? You'll throw a pregnant woman out on the streets? That's low, even for you." Her friends murmured in shock, already painting me as the villain in this encounter they had witnessed. "After everything you've done to me?" I fired back. tears welling in my eyes. You have the audacity to take zero accountability and act like the victim here? I turned away before letting my fury erupt and rushed out the door, needing to escape. I ended up holed up in a dingy 24-hour diner, sipping stale coffee, and wondering where my life went so horribly astray. I realized with sinking certainty that no matter how much I gave to appeasing Alina, she would never reciprocate. She was a remorseless black hole who only took and took until there was nothing left to give. I was tired of being the source that fed her insatiable need to manipulate. By the time I finally returned home near dawn, the apartment was blessedly silent, but it hardly felt like home any longer. In the end, Alina had gotten what she wanted. My sanctuary had been utterly defiled. I spent the next several days dodging Alina completely by burying myself in work and heading to the office to avoid her chaos. Then one day, I got a notification that I had been evicted from my apartment due to the constant partying and noise complaints. When I confronted Alina, she played dumb. You know how wild my friends can get sometimes. I tried to keep it under control, I swear. She had undermined me once again, this time destroying my living situation through neglect and irresponsibility. Alina had won, confident that I would never actually make her leave, as her due date grew closer. But the isolation and despair of losing my home validated what I already knew. I was better off alone than continuously being tormented by my own sister's venom. With nothing left to lose, it became startlingly clear what I had to do next. I would make Alina pay dearly for her multitude of sins against me. Once and for all, she needed to atone for the trail of misery she had unleashed. An idea began formulating in my mind, a deliciously devious plan to strip away that smug facade and make her feel the ultimate consequences. Revenge would be mine. After being evicted from my apartment, I had no choice but to crash with a friend while I got back on my feet. Alina had found a place to stay as well, though I made it clear I wanted zero contact with her unless it involved the baby. A few weeks later, I was interviewing for a graphic design role at a small agency. My previous work had them practically drooling to bring me aboard. As I waited in the lobby, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a crisp suit entered and gave me a warm smile. "You must be Brenna. I'm Cole, one of the lawyers who works with the agency on contracts and whatnot." I shook his outstretched hand, immediately comforted by his confident yet gentle demeanor. There was a kindness and integrity to his eyes that I hadn't encountered in a long time. After nailing the interview, I was offered the job on the spot. As I excitedly relayed the news to Cole, he flashed that smile again. "In that case, you'll have to let me take you out for celebratory drinks tonight, my treat." I'll admit, I was taken aback by his forwardness. But after everything with Alina and that snake Jamie, it was also refreshing to be direct and let intentions be known instead of dealing with mind games. "You know what? I'd like that," I replied with a sly grin. We ended up in a dive bar trading stories from our checkered pasts, with Cole being surprisingly open about overcoming a gambling addiction in his 20s. For my part, I gave him the carefully redacted version of my tale, avoiding any mention of Alina's treachery. "Sounds like this ex of yours really put you through the ringer," he observed after I danced around the details. "I'm just glad I was able to get my life on track before anything too disastrous happened." Something about Cole's soothing presence and words of encouragement left me longing to finally unburden the full truth I had been carrying alone for months. So many times Alina had weaponized her fake tears and pleas for support, manipulating me into offering misplaced empathy. But gazing into Cole's earnest eyes, I sensed I could finally confront those demons head-on without fear of exploitation. He just seemed to exude trustworthiness from every pore. "There's more to the story," I admitted, taking a stealing breath. "One that's eaten me up inside for longer than I can stand." Cole leaned in attentively as I relayed the foul details. Alina's despicable seduction of Jamie, her callous reveal of their affair, the psychological torment she inflicted repeatedly under the guise of needing family. With each agonizing confession, I could feel the weight of shame and anger releasing from my body. To his immense credit, Cole didn't once interrupt or judge. He simply listened, letting me purge those toxic burdens into the space between us. When I finally reached the end, tears streamed freely down my cheeks. Cole reached his hand across the table and clasped mine firmly. "I'm so sorry you had to go through all that," he said with quiet compassion. "Your sister, she sounds like a truly terrible person." I let out a shuddering breath, clinging to his steadying grip. "The worst part is, she keeps finding new ways to haunt me and make me miserable. I want to move on, but she won't let me." Cole's expression hardened as he gave a slow nod. "Then we need to make sure she can never hurt you again." Those 9 words were like a balm to my wounded spirit. For once, it wasn't just me against the cruel machinations of my own flesh and blood. I had an ally. As our eyes locked, I realized Cole was the asset I needed to finally, permanently put Alina in her place once and for all. No more toying with my life. No more toxic manipulations enabled by misguided family loyalty. It was time to stop being the victim and take control. Alina wanted to see the dark side. She was about to get her reign of terror paid back to her in spades. Over the next few weeks, Cole and I began hatching an intricate plan to bring Alina's misdeeds to light. I filled him in on all the sordid details and depraved acts she had committed, stoking the fires of his protective anger. "She needs to pay for what she's done," Cole stated firmly one evening over strategy meeting beers. "Exploiting family ties and decimating your life like that is unforgivable." I nodded fervently. Alina's twisted actions had cost me my home, my relationship, my peace of mind. All because of her jealousy and depravity. "I want to expose her lies and make her suffer the consequences," I declared, tempering the vengeful ire burning in my heart. "But I also want to do it in a way where she can never play the victim again." Cole leaned back, pensively stroking the stubble on his chiseled jaw as he processed my words. "You're talking about giving her enough figurative rope to hang herself," he said at last. "Getting her overconfident, poisonous fangs to extend so we can restrain them for good." A slow smile stretched across my face. "Leave it to the lawyer to articulate the strategy so perfectly." "Exactly. We need to make her slip up and reveal her true vile nature publicly, removing any plausible deniability." "And I know just the event that would make the perfect stage," Cole replied with a wolfish grin. A few days later, I was seated across from Alina at a luncheonette near her place. Her belly was massively swollen. The insufferable brat would be dropping that kid any day now. "You wanted to meet?" She regarded me with patent disinterest as she idly stirred her iced tea. "This better be good. Being on my feet is so taxing lately." I fought to keep my expression neutral as I produced a glossy invitation embossed with an award ceremony logo. "You remember that big design gala I attended last year? The one that effectively launched my career?" Alina's eyes narrowed as she caught the distinct whiff of professionalism and prestige. Her mouth began watering like a predator detecting vulnerability. "Of course," she replied coolly, adding a demeaning hair toss for good measure. "The only real success you've ever had in this industry." Hook, line and sinker. Well, this year they've asked me to not only attend the VIP reception, but present my latest branding concepts to the entire convention hall. I made sure to state the words slowly and clearly to amplify their impact. "I see," Alina responded, her veneer of indifference cracking slightly as envy glinted behind her eyes. "That's a rather prestigious honor. Which is why I'd love for my family to be there supporting me," I continued in a sugary sweet tone. "You and Jamie should both come as my special guests. It'll be a magical evening I want to share with the people I care about most." The blatant exclusion of Mom and Dad did not go unnoticed, based on the way Alina bristled. But her lust for the opulent gala overpowered any immediate objections. "I suppose Jamie and I could grace your little convention with our presence," she huffed airily. "After everything we've been through, the least you can do is dedicate your career highlight to making it up to us." I smiled inside at those words and her telling choice of the possessive pronoun, us. As if Jamie was still her depraved courtier, the infatuated ex who had turned his back on me for Alina's talons. "It's a date, then," I replied in sugary tones. "I'll have the +1 tickets waiting for you both under guest of honor." Alina was practically glowing, already envisioning herself lapping up accolades by merely being adjacent to my achievement. How deliciously, naively misguided she would prove to be. As I turned to leave, I allowed myself one parting remark that hinted at the reckoning to come. "This night will be one you never forget, sis." She had no idea just how prophetic and ominous those words would be. The design gala ceremony was destined to be Alina's denouement, the unraveling of her conniving character before the very audience she so desperately craved. Let the games begin. The night of the gala finally arrived. Cole and I had been meticulously planning and preparing every detail for weeks. As I put the finishing touches on my show-stopping design presentation, he arrived at my place looking dapper in a tailored tuxedo. "You about ready to go and destroy your sister?" he asked with an excited glint in his eye. I took a deep breath and nodded. More than ready. It's time for Alina's deception to finally catch up with her. When we arrived at the lushly decorated venue, Alina and Jamie were waiting by the VIP entrance, resplendent in formal attire. Her belly seemed obscenely inflated under the sleek maternity gown she wore. "Don't you two look like manned Mrs. High Society?" I remarked with syrupy sweetness as they turned to face me. Jamie averted his gaze guiltily, but Alina simply rolled her eyes. "Can't slum it too much for your precious career night, I suppose." Now, let's not start things off on the wrong foot," Cole smoothly interjected, placing a calming hand on my arm. "We're all here to celebrate Brenna's incredible accomplishments." "Ever the voice of reason," Alina purred, giving Cole an approving once-over. "You simply must introduce me to all your eligible colleagues later." "Actually, Alina, Cole is my partner," I replied firmly, squeezing his hand to emphasize the point. "He'll be by my side all evening." The tiniest flicker of disappointment passed over her features before that trademark predatory grin resurfaced. "How progressive of you, sis. I always suspected you batted for the other team." Cole cleared his throat uncomfortably as the double meaning hung in the air. "Well, shall we make our way inside? I believe the presentations are due to start shortly." We made our way through the grandiose double doors and took our seats near the front of the elaborately decorated auditorium. The energy among the assembled crowd was electric, with chatter and clinking glasses. I could feel Alina beside me seething with anticipation. After an opening speech from the host committee, it was finally time for my design presentation. I rose from my seat amidst warm applause and made my way to the stage, lectern before me. The crowd immediately hushed in rapt attention. Taking a fortifying breath, I launched into my presentation slides, a highly stylized branding concept for a new luxury resort. Each intricate graphic and color palette earned murmurs of approval from the audience. "Thank you all for such a wonderful reception to my work," I said as the final slide displayed. "I'm truly humbled and inspired to be among such talented peers in this creative field." Alina shifted impatiently beside Cole, clearly waiting for the real show to begin. That self-satisfied look on her face filled me with determination. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to give proper credit where it is sorely due, I continued, my voice hardening, to the person whose reprehensible misdeeds and depravity actually sowed the seeds for this conceptual rebirth. You could have heard a pin drop in that silent hall as I paused for maximum dramatic effect. Jamie and Alina exchanged a bewildered look. "Ladies and gentlemen," I proclaimed clearly and calmly, "let me tell you about the heinous transgressions of my own wretched sister Alina." And with that, a torrent of revelations began spilling forth from my lips. The seduction of Jamie, the bitter jealousy towards me, the callous manipulation of family bonds. My presentation shifted to projecting shocking proof through photos, texts, audio recordings that Cole had diligently compiled. Audible gasps and murmurs of shock echoed from the stunned crowd. Alina's mouth hung open, her face draining of color as the sordid truth unraveled. You bitch!" she erupted once the final piece of damning evidence played, causing her voice to overtake the mic. "How dare you try to publicly shame and humiliate me?" I simply stood calmly, letting her unleash a torrent of outrage that only further condemned her depravity in the eyes of the horrified attendees. Jamie beside her looked like a cornered animal. With one icy glare of contempt, I knew I had accomplished my objective. Alina's viperous fangs were fully extended, and I had the antidote to permanently neuter her poisonous ways. As security rushed in to subdue her, Cole took the stage, his voice booming with authority. "Alina Merriweather, you are hereby being charged with defamation of character, financial fraud, emotional duress, and a menagerie of other offenses against your own flesh and blood." The rest was a blissful blur. In one fell swoop, I had ripped away the veil of deception Alina had hidden behind for far too long. This was her undoing, televised to the entire creative community. There would be no recovering from such a merciless public dismantling of her true nature. At long last, my tormentor had been disarmed and brought to justice. As they led her away in humiliated hysterics, I savored that gratifying realization. Revenge really was a dish best served utterly, shockingly cold. The aftermath of my public takedown of Alina at the gala was swift and severe. In the days that followed, a veritable firestorm erupted across social media and the creative industry. Influential designers, artists, and peers I had looked up to for years took to their platforms to excoriate Alina's abhorrent actions and deceitful behavior. The vitriol was scalding, emboldened by the undeniable proof I had showcased. Jamie, clearly expecting to slink away from the carnage unscathed, instead found himself just as vilified. People couldn't fathom how he could betray me in such a craven manner with my own flesh and blood. What separation was too low to stoop? As for Alina, well, let's just say her phone kept ringing with notifications of friends, colleagues, and employers alike distancing themselves at light speed. Her vain pursuit of social status and prestige spectacularly imploded in her face. I watched it all unfold like a solemn observer, sipping coffee in my apartment with Cole's reassuring presence beside me. He squeezed my hand as each fresh wave of backlash rippled outwards. "No one can refute the truth of what you exposed," he said quietly. "The whole world can see Alina for the toxic, soulless person she truly is." I released a deep, cathartic sigh, feeling lighter than I had in what felt like an eternity. All this time spent suffocating under her manipulative grip, and now she's the one reaping the total alienation she deserves. A slight smile played across Cole's lips. That's not all the reaping she has in store. A few days later, Alina appeared at my apartment, her disgraceful fall from grace punctuated by haggard eyes and disheveled hair. The slightest swell of her belly served as a malignant reminder of her cardinal sin against me. "Happy now?" She spat before I could utter a word. "You've completely devastated my life and career, all for some pathetic bid at revenge." I rose calmly from the couch, straightening my spine to face her. "I should have done this a hell of a lot sooner. You brought this on yourself with your repugnant actions and inability to feel any shred of remorse." Alina opened her mouth to retort, but Cole cut her off as he emerged from the hallway, briefcase in hand. "I wouldn't attempt to plead any sort of defense if I were you," he stated flatly. "Your endless litany of offenses is too extensive to dismiss." Alina's eyes widened in sudden apprehension as Cole snapped open the briefcase, shuffling through a stack of folders and documents inside. "What are you talking about?" she demanded in a wavering voice. "Oh, did Brenna conveniently leave out the minor matter of the criminal proceedings we've initiated?" Cole replied with a sardonic grin. "Because in addition to the severe professional and societal fallout, you're also being pursued legally for your misdeeds." With deft precision, Cole began reciting an exhaustive list of charges. Financial fraud, defamation of character, emotional distress, harassment. The sheer number was dizzying. For each transgression, he brandished documented evidence in the form of bank statements, email trails, even voice recordings of her vindictive ravings. Throughout the surgical dressing down, Alina's countenance progressively drained of its former arrogant bluster. By the time Cole reached the end, her lower lip trembled and eyes glistened with impotent rage. "You can't be serious? Over what, some juvenile sisterly feuding?" Cole's expression hardened like steel. "Over you inflicting permanent psychological devastation through repeated, calculated abuses towards your own family. Quite serious charges, I'd say." Alina said nothing, her mouth working soundlessly as the gravity of her predicament crashed down upon her. In a twisted way, I almost pitied the sniveling state she now found herself reduced to. The mighty really had fallen. "Get out of my home," I said in a toneless murmur. "I never want to see your wretched face again after what you've put me through." With that parting shot, Alina seemed to dissolve into a pathetic puddle of self-loathing and humiliation. She skulked from my apartment without another word, having no fight or survival instinct left after her vile soul had been extracted so ruthlessly. I turned and embraced Cole, nestling into the crook of his strong shoulder as the door clicked shut behind Alina's exit. At long last, the demon had been fully, permanently exorcised. I could breathe freely again, without her cancerous presence polluting my existence. As a new dawn rose, I reveled in the first day of reclaiming my life wholly on my own terms. Revenge could never be sweeter than this long-coveted liberation. With Alina forcibly extricated from my life, the world suddenly seemed brighter, the air crisper. Like a cancer in remission, the toxic malignancy that was my sister had been cut out, allowing healing to finally take root. In the weeks that followed her shameful departure, the fallout from my exposé at the gala continued rippling outwards in destructive waves. Alina found herself persona non grata in every professional circle, her reputation irreparably sullied. She was terminated from her posh marketing job after a tidal wave of outraged emails and calls overwhelmed the company's HR department. Self-inflicted pariah status ensured she was blacklisted from any other opportunities in the future. The legal ramifications were even more severe. I watched with a satisfied smirk as Alina shuffled into the courthouse for her first hearing, wearing an oversized coat to conceal her swollen pregnancy frame. The once radiant beauty had withered into a haggard, downtrodden shadow. Cole delivered an impassioned prosecution statement, methodically presenting all the evidence of his emotional abuse, financial misdeeds, and malicious actions compiled against me over the years. Her public defender could only sit mutely as he was buried under the overwhelming mountain of proof. Due to the severity and extent of these calculated offenses, perpetrated by the defendant, we are seeking maximum punitive damages be awarded to the victim, Miss Brenna Wilkins, Cole proclaimed, shooting me a subtle wink of encouragement. I wasn't primarily concerned with monetary restitution. No amount could undo the trauma and gaslighting Alina had inflicted upon me. But I reveled in her ashen, defeated expression as the judges sworn her guilty on every count, saddling her with fines, community service obligations, and potential jail time. The ultimate insult was she wouldn't even be able to fall back on her false public relations skills in the future to salvage any sort of career resurrection. I had ensured her toxic reputation would forever supersede any professional competence. As the sentencing concluded, and bailiffs escorted Alina from the room in handcuffs, she finally met my eyes. The hollow, vitriolic glare she shot my way spoke volumes about the molten core of hatred still burning within her shriveled husk. A final burst of venom for the traitorous sister who orchestrated her downfall. I simply watched stoically, unmoved and unaffected by her empty, impotent rage. She had nobody to blame but herself for the miserable pit into which she now festered. I found it profoundly symbolic justice that she would likely give birth to her child under the oppressive weight of incarceration. That night, Cole took me out for a celebratory dinner at an upscale restaurant, treating me to expensive wine and desserts. As we polished off the last morsels, I caught him giving me an adoring look across the table. "What?" I asked with a slight blush at his tender gaze. "I'm just thinking about how far you've come," he replied meaningfully. "From the broken, emotionally battered person you were when we first met, to this brilliant, confident phoenix reborn from the ashes of your past traumas. You're a true inspiration, Brenna." I felt a lump catch in my throat at his heartfelt words. Cole had stood resolution at my side through all the turmoil, his solidity and compassion giving me the strength to persevere. He quite literally helped me take back my life. Without overthinking it, I reached across the table and took his hand, giving it an affectionate squeeze. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," I said softly. "You saw me at my lowest and darkest points, and still chose to believe in me and put that monster in her place. I'll never be able to repay that debt." Cole's thumb traced soothing circles over my knuckles as he gazed warmly into my eyes. "Just promise me one thing, that you'll leave the past in the past. Let the hurt and anger go, and only allow positive growth from this point forward." I felt a solitary tear of release trickle down my cheek as I gave a firm nod, absorbing the depth of his caring counsel. For far too long, Alina's toxic legacy had weighed me down and inhibited me from true self-actualization. It was finally time to shed that heavy, corroded chain forever. "You have my word," I replied, returning Cole's tender smile. With him by my side, I knew there was nothing but bright possibilities ahead. A lifetime's worth of potential awaited me, unburdened by the poisonous shackles of my own flesh and blood. For the first time in forever, I could breathe freely and choose my own destiny. Karma had ultimately had its karmic reckoning, delivering me from the torturous thrall of evil that was my sister. Moving forward, I would embrace hope, optimism, and the inner fortitude to never let such a cancerous force diminish my spirit again. A new chapter was finally free to begin.